there, Poetry Freaks. Welcome to Poetry Freaks Podcast, Episode 5, Haunted Oaks, where we talk about Paul Laurence Dunbar, exquisite poet. But first, the Dream Whip box for our String of Pearls poem that we are assembling through the summer. And the phrase is, what is that in my shoe? Something's hinky. All for the word hinky, and you know it. Okay, so that will be the fifth line in the poem we are assembling at random with phrases pulled from a box, some of them old and I'd forgotten about them. But anyway, onward. Last episode, we looked at Rainer Maria Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet, and rolled for a theme for a poem that we could write for this episode, or this week, or however you're doing it. And the mood was 1,000 Nights of Love Revive. The word was aloneness, so I give you 1,000 Nights of Love Revive by way of aloneness. Moon under glass, 1,000 nights magnified. You'll never catch up to my 1,000. My nights on speeding trains, all a dream, a dream. That Beatles song came rattling through my lips, and somehow you had died. A gasping bolt upright, refusing to dream on in aloneness, but lived it by daylight, fine and dandy. Thank you. I was on the porch this morning writing the poem for this episode, and I almost got real confessional with it, like I often do, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it this time. I do it all the time, not today. And so I just all of a sudden remembered this dream I had when I was 13 or 14. And it kind of got woven into that poem in its own little way. Well, today we're looking at the poet, novelist, essayist, Paul Laurence Dunbar. And so we have some poetic moods that are lines from his poems, or, those are all lines from his poems. And in fact, after I roll the mood and roll the Dunbar-related word, I think I'm going to read all of the moods in a String of Pearls Dunbar-style, because they came together really cool by complete chance. So, speaking of chance, rolling for the poetic mood. 4, I'm singing here to you, love. Another love-related prompt. The word for this one is 5, which is LARK. He loved putting birds in his poem and bird themes. Before we go onward and find out more about his life, I'm going to read the poetic moods in a Dunbar String of Pearls as promised. I shook with his gurgling moan after the quarrel. I sing my song and all is well. I'm singing here to you, love. And who is it rides by night, nature's poets? A pint of joy to a peck of trouble, but in a poem let me sup. But the spirit wine of a singing line, or a dewdrop in a honey cup. I'm telling you, these were sort of discovered at random. I kept them in the order that I found them, except I'd be like, wait, no, I don't have enough room for all the ones I want to use, so I'm going to change number 2 to this one I just found. And it still came out to me like a regular, fantabulous poem, because look at what you're working with. Lines from Paul Laurence Dunbar. And while we're at it, we're going to talk about his life from Poetry Foundation, a really cool biography, and I'm going to read part of it, and then I'm going to tell what I remember from reading it. So good luck me. So Paul Laurence Dunbar was born on June 27th, upcoming, 1872, to 2 formerly enslaved people from Kentucky. He became one of the first influential Black poets in American literature and was internationally acclaimed for his dialect verse in collections such as Majors and Minors, 1895, and Lyrics of Lowly Life, from 1896. The dialect poems constitute only a small portion of Dunbar's canon, which is replete with novels, short stories, essays, and many poems. In its entirety, Dunbar's literary body is regarded as an impressive representation of Black life in the turn of the century United States, that being 19th to 20th century, of course. Dunbar began showing literary promise while still in high school in Dayton, Ohio, where he lived with his widowed mother. The only African American in his class, he became president of the school literary society, editor-in-chief of the school paper, and class poet. By 1889, 2 years before he graduated, he had already published poems in the Dayton Herald and worked as an editor of the short-lived Dayton Tattler, a Black newspaper. Although their names are not listed in the publication, Dunbar's classmate Orville Wright and Wright's brother Wilbur printed the newspaper. Interesting. So, Dunbar did his first two poetry collections. He published Oak and Ivy and Majors and Minors. They were published. They were successful. He did book tours. He had a really kind of packed life where he was writing his novels, essays, poems, doing book tours, worked for the Library of Congress for a while, did all kinds of stuff, died at the age of 33 of tuberculosis. So he was married for a brief time, stayed married even though they separated, and then he was living with his mother while he had tuberculosis. He had moved to Colorado to try and get the good air, but in the end, he was only 33 when he died. But wow, what a lot of cool things he wrote. I'm going to read a few of his poems. Right now I'm going to start with Sympathy, which is, I think, his best known poem, and for good reason, because as we may be familiar, Maya Angelou was inspired by it. And here is Sympathy. I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes and the faint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the caged bird feels. I know why the caged bird beats his wing till its blood is red on the cruel bars, for he must fly back to his perch and cling when he fain would be on the bough a swing, and a pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why he beats his wing. I know why the caged bird sings, ah me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. And that is Sympathy from Paul Laurence Dunbar. The next one I'd like to read is from 1901, titled Compensation. Because I had loved so deeply, because I had loved so long, God in his great compassion gave me the gift of song. Because I have loved so vainly and sung with such faltering breath, the Master in infinite mercy offers the boon of death. That one rings. That one rings. Okay. Next, from 1899, A Choice. They please me not, these solemn songs that hint of sermons covered up. 'Tis true the world should heed its wrongs, but in a poem let me sup. Not simples brewed to cure or ease humanity's confessed disease, but the spirit wine of a singing line or a dewdrop in a honey cup. Amen to that. Let's celebrate with poetry. Finally, this is my favorite poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, and it's called The Haunted Oak. And the first time I heard it, oddly, was on a podcast called Halloween Haunts. Yeah, because the host was called the Halloween Haunter. The podcast was the Halloween Haunts, and it is a very moving poem, and I'm going to read it. And it's called Haunted Oak. Pray, why are you so bare, O bough of the old oak tree? And why, when I go through the shade you throw, runs a shudder over me? My leaves were green as the best I trow, and sap ran free in my veins. But I saw in the moonlight, dim and weird, a guiltless victim's pains. I bent me down to hear his sigh, I shook with his gurgling moan, and I trembled sore when they rode away and left him there alone. They charged him with the old crime and set him fast in jail. Oh, why does the dog howl all night long, and why does the night wind wail? He prayed his prayer, and he swore his oath, and he raised his hand to the sky, but the beat of hoofs smote on his ear, and the steady tread drew nigh. Who is it rides by night, over the moonlit road? And what is the spur that keeps the pace? What is the galling goad? And now they beat at the prison door. Ho, keeper, do not stay. We are friends of him whom you hold within, and we fain would take him away from those who ride fast on our heels with mind to do him wrong. They have no care for his innocence, and the rope they bear is long. They have fooled the jailer with lying words. They have fooled the man with lies. The bolts unbar, the locks are drawn, and the great door open flies. Now they have taken him from the jail, and hard and fast they ride, and the leader laughs low down in his throat as they halt my trunk beside. Oh, the judge, he wore a mask of black, and the doctor one of white, and the minister with his oldest son was curiously bedight. Oh, foolish man, why weep you now? 'Tis but a little space, and the time will come when these shall dread the memory of your face. I feel the rope against my bark and the weight of him in my grain. I feel the throe of his final woe, the touch of my own last pain. And never more shall leaves come forth on a bough that bears the bane. I am burned with dread, I am dried and dead from the curse of a guiltless man. And ever the judge rides by, and goes to hunt the deer, and ever another rides his soul in the guise of a mortal fear, and ever the man he rides me hard, and never a night stays he, for I feel his curse as a haunted bough on the trunk of a haunted tree. The Haunted Oak. And from James A. Emanuel on The Haunted Oak from modernamericanpoetry.org, this insight: the Haunted Oak, written and published in 1900, could have been based on one of the 105 lynchings that occurred that year, but it was inspired in Washington, D.C. by a story that Dunbar heard an old black man relate concerning his nephew in Alabama, who had been hanged on an oak tree by a mob of whites after having been falsely accused of, quote, a grave crime. According to the story, shortly afterwards, the leaves on the limb used for the lynching yellowed and fell off, and unlike the rest of the normal tree, the offending bough shriveled and died. Townspeople began to call the tree the Haunted Oak. Dunbar, using the ballad form to enhance the superstition, personifies the tree and makes it the most sensitive and remorseful participant of the crime. So that is our exploration of some poetry from Paul Laurence Dunbar. Happy Juneteenth, and thank you for joining me. Oh, there was something I was going to say, if I can find it. Okay, Poetry Freaks. I wanted to show you the book. I finally got it because I ordered it the slow way, the author copies, which are cheaper. But there it is, and you can get it now. And there's another one you can get now that I don't have a copy to show, and it is called Disembodied: Poems for Wandering Ghosts, just released. And it's on Amazon.com. I'll put the link in the show notes to all of that stuff. So thank you for joining. Ride along if you want with the poem. And I don't even remember what the prompt is ever. I never do. I'll put it in the show notes. So, all right. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time, Poetry Freaks. Grab your poetry hat, let's go. Grab your poetry hat, let's go.